Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, Seoul's skyline, Pyongyang's military parades, and historical images of the Korean War. The division of the Korean Peninsula is one of the world's most enduring conflicts. The story of North and South Korea is one of war, diplomacy, and survival under two very different regimes. In this video, we will explore the history of the Korean Peninsula, the reasons behind the division, the ongoing tensions, and the allies that have supported each side. Historical background: Korea before division. Old photos of the Korean Peninsula under Japanese rule, resistance movements, World War II footage before the division. Korea was a unified kingdom for over 1,000 years. However, from 1910 to 1945, Korea was a colony of Japan. During this time, the Korean people endured harsh rule and fought for independence. The Korean independence movement, World War II ending in the Pacific, and Japanese surrender in 1945, Japan's defeat in World War II ended its occupation of Korea. However, instead of restoring a unified Korea, the peninsula was divided along the 38th parallel. The Soviet Union occupied the north, and the United States occupied the south, setting the stage for a divided nation. A map of Korea being divided along the 38th parallel. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953. Korean War battles, North Korean invasion of the South, US and UN involvement, Chinese troops entering the war in 1950. The Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States escalated into a hot war on the Korean Peninsula. On June 25, 1950, North Korean forces, backed by the Soviet Union, launched a surprise invasion of South Korea. This marked the start of the Korean War. North Korean troops advancing into South Korea and the United Nations intervention led by the US, the United States and the United Nations quickly came to South Korea's defense. However, the war took a dramatic turn when Chinese forces entered the conflict to support North Korea, leading to a bloody stalemate. Chinese forces crossing the Yalu River, battles at the Pusan perimeter, and in Chun landings by 1953, after millions of deaths and mass destruction, an armistice was signed. However, the Korean War never officially ended, and the peninsula remains divided to this day, with a heavily fortified border known as the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, the armistice being signed and the creation of the DMZ. The Cold War era, 1950s-1990s. Pyongyang under Kim Il-sung, Seoul's development, the rise of South Korea's economy after the armistice. North Korea, under the leadership of Kim Il-sung, established a communist dictatorship with close ties to the Soviet Union and China. The regime became increasingly isolated and militaristic, while its people were subjected to strict control and indoctrination. North Korea's early development and military parades. Meanwhile, South Korea, initially governed by authoritarian regimes, began to develop economically with support from the United States and other Western countries. By the 1980s and 1990s, South Korea had transitioned to a democracy and became one of the world's leading economies. South Korea's rapid economic development, including industries like electronics and automobiles, and scenes of political protests leading to democracy, the nuclear issue and modern tensions, 1990s-2020s, North Korean nuclear tests, South Korean protests, international diplomacy, and summit meetings since the 1990s. Tensions between North and South Korea have often centered around North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons. North Korea conducted its first nuclear test in 2006 and has since developed increasingly powerful nuclear and missile capabilities, drawing international sanctions and condemnation. North Korean missile tests, nuclear tests, and missile launches over Japan, the international community, particularly the United States, South Korea, and Japan, have repeatedly called for denuclearization, but North Korea insists its weapons are necessary for self-defense. Meanwhile, South Korea has responded by strengthening its military alliances with the US, while also pursuing diplomatic engagement when possible. US-South Korean military drills, summits between North and South Korean leaders, and the Trump-Kim summits alliances on both sides. Map showing the alliances of North and South Korea and North Korea. China is North Korea's most important ally and economic lifeline. While relations have fluctuated, China has consistently supported North Korea diplomatically, though it has also called for restraint in its nuclear ambitions. Russia has maintained ties with North Korea since the Soviet era. Although not as close as China, Russia has supported North Korea's regime diplomatically and economically, especially in the United Nations Security Council. Meetings between Kim Jong-un and Chinese and Russian leaders. South Korea. The US is South Korea's primary ally, with thousands of US troops stationed in the country as a deterrent against North Korean aggression. The two nations have a mutual defense treaty, and the US provides significant military and economic support. Despite historical tensions, South Korea and Japan share a common interest in countering North Korean threats. Both countries cooperate closely with the US in defense initiatives. US-South Korean military exercises and diplomatic meetings between South Korea, the US, and Japan. The current situation, 2024. Recent military drills, satellite images of North Korean missile sites, diplomatic negotiations. As of 2024, tensions on the Korean peninsula remain high. North Korea continues its missile tests, despite international sanctions, while South Korea and the US conduct regular joint military exercises. There have been moments of diplomatic breakthroughs, such as the inter-Korean summits and US-North Korea talks, but no lasting peace agreement has been reached. Military parades in Pyongyang and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol meeting with US officials. While South Korea has grown into a global economic power and a thriving democracy, North Korea remains isolated and heavily militarized under Kim Jong-un's regime. The future of the Korean peninsula remains uncertain, as both sides continue to build up their military capabilities. Humanitarian impact and prospects for peace. North Korean defectors, humanitarian aid efforts, and footage from the DMZ. The human cost of the division is immense. Millions of families remain separated, and life in North Korea continues to be marked by poverty, repression, and human rights abuses. Meanwhile, South Korea continues to thrive, but it remains vulnerable to North Korea's unpredictable actions. North Korean refugees, defectors, and international aid being sent to North Korea during times of famine. While peace remains elusive, the international community continues to advocate for dialogue and denuclearization. However, with both sides entrenched in their positions, the Korean peninsula remains one of the most militarized and tense regions in the world. Peace talks, calls for reconciliation, and life inside the DMZ. Thank you for watching. We have some amazing videos coming up, so stay tuned for more updates on global geopolitics. And make sure to hit the subscribe button for more.